The stars looked different from the bridge of the UES Harbinger as it moved through the empty space near the Kepler system. Captain Jake Morrison stood behind his command chair and watched the main screen show nothing but darkness and distant points of light. His ship was one of the newest in the human fleet, built for long missions far from Earth. The crew of 200 people had been out here for 6 months, checking the borders of human space and making sure everything stayed quiet. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at her sensor station and ran her fingers across the control panel. Her job was to watch for anything unusual in the area around their ship. Most days she saw nothing except rocks floating in space and the normal background noise that came from distant stars. Today felt different, though. She had been getting strange readings for the past hour, very faint signals that appeared and disappeared like shadows. "Captain Morrison," she called out without turning around from her station. "I am picking up something weird at the edge of our scanning range. The computer cannot identify what it is." Morrison walked over to look at her screen. The display showed waves of energy that pulsed in patterns he had never seen before. "How far away is it?" "About 3 million kilometers to our northwest. The signal keeps changing, though. Sometimes it is strong and sometimes it almost disappears completely." The captain looked at the readings for several minutes. In his 20 years of service, he had seen many strange things in space, but this was new. "Keep watching it closely. Let me know if it gets stronger or if it moves toward us." Far away from the human ship, another vessel moved through space without being seen. The Whisper of Stars was much smaller than the Harbinger, but its technology was far more advanced. Its hull was made from materials that bent light around it, making it invisible to most sensors. Inside the ship, Scout Commander Vex High studied the readings his crew was getting from the unknown vessel they had found. Vex High was tall and thin like all members of his species. His skin had a blue tint, and his large black eyes could see much better than human eyes. He had been exploring space for over 50 years and had met hundreds of different species during that time. Most of them were primitive creatures who had barely learned to leave their home planets. Some were still living in caves or just starting to build cities. "What do we know about these creatures?" he asked his science officer. "Very little, Commander. Our long-range scouts reported finding signs of a new spacefaring species in this sector, but no detailed information. Their ship appears to use fusion, engines and metal hull construction. Very basic technology compared to our standards." Vex High nodded. This was exactly what he expected to find. The Zephyrian Empire had been expanding across the galaxy for over 3,000 years. They had conquered or absorbed hundreds of worlds and made contact with countless species. In all that time, they had never found another race that could match their technology or military power. This new species would probably be no different. "Can they detect our ship?" he asked. "Impossible, Commander. Our cloaking system is far beyond anything they could have developed. We could fly right next to them and they would never know we were there." The commander smiled. This mission would be easy like all the others. He would study the new species for a few days, learn about their capabilities, and then report back to the Empire. If they seemed useful, they might be allowed to join as a servant race. If they caused any trouble, they would be eliminated quickly and quietly. On the Harbinger, Lieutenant Rodriguez watched her sensors with growing concern. The strange signals were getting stronger and seemed to be moving in their direction. She had never seen energy patterns like these before. Whatever was making them had technology that was completely unknown to human science. "Captain, the contact is definitely moving toward us. Distance is now 2 million kilometers and closing slowly." Morrison felt his heart beat faster. First contact with an alien species was something every space captain hoped for, but also feared. Humanity had been exploring space for over 2 centuries, but had never found any signs of intelligent life. Now it seemed that intelligent life had found them instead. "Sound yellow alert," he ordered. "All senior officers to the bridge immediately." Lights began flashing throughout the ship, and a soft alarm tone echoed through the corridors. Crew members quickly moved to their emergency positions while the senior staff hurried to the bridge. Within 5 minutes, the command center was full of people waiting for orders. "Rodriguez, what is the status of our contact?" Morrison asked. still approaching at low speed. Distance is now 1.8 million kilometers. The energy signature is unlike anything in our database. Morrison looked around at his officers. These were good people who had trained for years to handle situations like this. Dr. Lisa Park, what do your instruments tell us about this contact? The science officer checked her readings carefully. The energy patterns suggest advanced technology, possibly some kind of propulsion system we have never seen before. There are also signs of what might be a cloaking device. Cloaking device? Morrison asked. You mean they might be trying to hide from us? That is possible, sir. If so, our sensors are only picking up small leaks in their stealth system. The captain thought about this information. An alien species with cloaking technology was approaching. His ship. They might be friendly explorers like humans, or they might be scouts for a hostile empire. Either way, humanity was about to make first contact with another intelligent species. Open a communication channel on all frequencies, he ordered. Broadcast mathematical sequences, prime numbers, and peaceful greetings in every format we have. Let them know we want to talk. The communication officer began sending signals into space toward the approaching contact. Radio waves, light pulses, and quantum transmissions all carried the same message. Humanity was peaceful and wanted to establish friendly relations with any intelligent beings who might be listening. Commander Vexhai was shocked when his ship began receiving direct communications from the human vessel. His science officer stared at the incoming signals with disbelief. Commander, they are transmitting directly at our position. Somehow they know exactly where we are. That is impossible, Vexhai said. Our cloaking system has never failed before. The signals contain mathematical patterns and what appears to be peaceful contact protocols. They want to establish communication. Vexhai felt confused for the first time in many years. No primitive species had ever detected a cloaked Zephyrian ship before. These humans seemed to have capabilities that his intelligence reports had not mentioned. Perhaps they were not as backward as he had assumed. Maintain cloak but reduce power to the engines, he ordered. Let me think about this situation. The two ships continued to move slowly toward each other through the empty space. Between the stars, each crew wondering what they would discover about the other species. Commander Vexhai stared at the incoming transmissions from the human ship with growing confusion. In 50 years of exploring space, he had never encountered a species that could detect Zephyrian cloaking technology. The humans were not supposed to have sensors that advanced. According to all the preliminary reports, they were a young species that had barely learned to travel between stars. Science Officer Kralvin, run a full diagnostic on our cloaking system, he ordered. There must be some kind of malfunction. The science officer worked at his station for several minutes before looking up with a troubled expression. All systems are functioning perfectly, Commander. Our cloak is operating at full efficiency. Somehow these humans have sensors that can penetrate our stealth field. Vexhai felt a chill run through his body. The Zephyrian Empire's military superiority was based largely on their advanced technology. If other species could match their capabilities, everything would change. He tried to push these thoughts away and focus on the mission. There had to be a reasonable explanation for what was happening. Reduce cloak to partial invisibility and open a communication channel, he decided. I will speak with these humans and determine exactly what they are capable of. On the bridge of the Harbinger, Captain Morrison watched his main screen as a ship slowly began to appear in front of them. The vessel was sleek and beautiful, with curves and angles that seemed to flow together like water. Its hull reflected the light from nearby stars in patterns that hurt to look at directly. This was clearly the work of a species with technology, far beyond anything humans had achieved. My God, whispered Dr. Lisa Park. Look at the design of that ship. The materials, the construction techniques, the energy efficiency. They are centuries ahead of us in engineering. Morrison nodded but tried not to show how impressed he was. Open a channel and let me talk to them. Use the universal translation program and keep recording everything. The main screen flickered and then showed the image of an alien being. Vexhai appeared tall and graceful, with blue-tinted skin and large black eyes that seemed to look right through the human captain. When he spoke, the translation system converted his words into English. I am Scout Commander Vexhai of the Zephyrian Empire. You are the first humans I have encountered. I am here to learn about your species and determine your level of development. Morrison stood up and faced the screen. I am Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Harbinger. Welcome to Human Space, Commander. We are peaceful explorers, and we are very interested in establishing friendly relations with your people. HFY studied the human captain for a moment. Morrison looked young and inexperienced compared to Zephyrian commanders. His ship was crude and basic, clearly the work of a species that had not yet mastered advanced engineering. Everything about the situation suggested that humans were exactly what the preliminary reports had indicated: a primitive race that posed no threat to the Empire. Captain Morrison, I require detailed information about your territory and fleet positions for our galactic registry. Please transmit navigational data for all human worlds and military installations immediately. Morrison felt surprised by the demanding tone in the alien's voice. He had expected first contact to be more diplomatic, with both sides carefully exchanging basic information and building trust slowly. Instead, this Commander HFY was acting like he had the right to demand sensitive military data from complete strangers. I appreciate your interest in learning about humanity, Commander, but I cannot share that kind of information without proper authorization. Military and navigational data would need to be discussed through official diplomatic channels between our governments. HFY blinked his large eyes in confusion. No species had ever refused a direct order from a Zephyrian commander before. Usually when primitive races encountered the Empire, they immediately recognized their superiority and cooperated fully. These humans seemed to think they could negotiate as equals. Captain Morrison, perhaps you do not understand the situation. The Zephyrian Empire has controlled this region of the galaxy for over 3,000 years. We have conquered or absorbed hundreds of worlds. When we request information from a new species, that species provides it immediately. Morrison remained calm, but his voice grew firmer. Commander, I understand that your people are very advanced and have achieved great things. However, humanity is a sovereign species with our own territory and laws. We are happy to work toward peaceful relations, but we will not simply hand over sensitive information to strangers. Dr. Park had been running passive scans of the alien ship while the two captains talked. Her instruments were gathering data about the vessel's construction, power systems, and defensive capabilities. What she found was both impressive and surprising. The Zephyrian technology was indeed very advanced, but it was not perfect. Their shields had harmonic frequencies that could be disrupted. Their power systems had redundancies that could be overloaded. Most importantly, their ship was designed for stealth and reconnaissance, not for heavy combat. She quietly activated a secure communication line to Captain Morrison's earpiece. Sir, their technology is advanced, but their ship has several weaknesses. If necessary, we could disable them without causing permanent damage. Morrison nodded slightly to show he had received the message, but he kept his expression neutral. He did not want to escalate the situation into violence if it could be avoided. HFY was growing increasingly frustrated with the human captain's stubborn attitude. Every species the Empire had encountered before had either submitted immediately or been quickly overwhelmed by Zephyrian superiority. These humans seemed to think their primitive technology could somehow protect them. Captain Morrison, I will explain this once more. The Zephyrian Empire controls over 200 star systems. We have subjugated countless species across multiple galaxies. Our technology is thousands of years more advanced than yours. Resistance to our authority is completely futile. You will provide the requested information, or face the consequences. Morrison looked around at his crew. Every person on the bridge was watching the conversation carefully. They were all trained professionals who knew their jobs, but they were also human beings who did not like being threatened by strangers. The captain could see determination in their faces. If this situation turned violent, his people would be ready. Commander HFY, I respect the achievements of your empire, but humanity will not be intimidated into submission. We prefer peaceful cooperation between equals. I suggest we arrange a formal meeting between representatives of our governments to establish proper diplomatic relations. The alien commander's eyes grew wide with shock. No primitive species had ever suggested that they were equals to the mighty Zephyrian Empire. The idea was so ridiculous that for a moment he could not think of how to respond. These humans were either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. You dare to suggest that your pathetic species could negotiate with the Empire as equals? Vexhi's voice rose with anger. You have barely learned to travel between stars while we have mastered the galaxy. You build crude metal ships while we command vessels that bend space itself. You are insects compared to us. Morrison felt his own anger beginning to rise, but he forced himself to remain professional. Commander, insulting my species will not help us establish good relations. Humanity has learned many things during our time in space. We have also learned that true strength comes not from threatening others, but from building mutual respect and cooperation. Vexhi stared at the human captain with complete disbelief. In all his years of service to the Empire, no one had ever spoken to him this way. Primitive species were supposed to recognize Zephyrian superiority immediately and beg for mercy. Instead, this human was lecturing him about respect and cooperation as if they were somehow important. The scout commander decided that these humans needed a demonstration of real power. Their stubborn attitude was clearly the result of ignorance about what the Empire was capable of. Once they saw Zephyrian weapons in action, they would quickly change their minds about negotiating as equals. Captain Morrison, you have made a serious mistake. You have chosen to resist the authority of the Zephyrian Empire. I will now show you what happens to species that make such foolish decisions. Vexhi turned to his weapons officer. Power up all combat systems and target their engines. A small demonstration of our capabilities should convince them to be more reasonable. The whisper of stars began to glow as its weapon systems came online. Energy flowed through circuits that had been designed by the finest engineers in the Empire. In seconds, the ship would be ready to disable the primitive human vessel and force its crew to surrender. Captain Morrison watched the alien ship's weapons charging and felt his heart rate increase. The moment of truth had arrived. Either humanity would prove itself worthy of respect, or they would become another conquered species in the Zephyrian Empire's long history of domination. Commander Vexhi watched with satisfaction as his ship's weapons powered up to full capacity. The energy readings on his screen showed that the whisper of stars was ready to demonstrate the true power of Zephyrian technology. He expected the humans to panic when they saw his weapons charging. Most primitive species immediately surrendered when faced with superior firepower. These stubborn humans would learn their place in the galaxy soon enough. Weapons are fully charged and ready, Commander, reported his tactical officer. Target is locked on their engine section. One shot will disable their propulsion without destroying the ship. Vexhi nodded with approval. Open a final communication channel to their captain. I will give him one last chance to surrender before we show him the consequences of defying the Empire. On the bridge of the Harbinger, Captain Morrison watched. The alien ship's weapons come online. Every instinct told him to order evasive maneuvers or return fire immediately. Instead, he stood calmly behind his command chair and activated his communication system. Red alert, he announced to his crew. All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill. Throughout the ship, alarm klaxons began sounding as crew members rushed to their emergency positions. Gun crews loaded weapons while damage control teams prepared for possible hull breaches. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Bill Watson pushed the fusion reactors to full power and activated all defensive systems. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez looked up from her sensor station with concern. Captain, the alien ship has enough firepower to seriously damage us. Their weapons are unlike anything in our database. Morrison nodded but remained calm. Rodriguez, send an emergency signal on frequency 77 Alpha. Use authentication code Morrison77 Baker. The lieutenant's fingers flew across her control panel as she transmitted the coded message into what appeared to be empty space. To Commander Vexhi, it looked like the humans were simply broadcasting random signals in desperation. Captain Morrison, the alien commander's voice came through the speakers. This is your final warning. Power down your weapons and prepare to surrender your navigational data. You have 30 seconds to comply before I demonstrate what Zephyrian technology can do to your primitive ship. Morrison looked directly at the screen showing Vexhi's image. Commander, I want you to understand something about humanity. We prefer peace, but we are not defenseless. You are making a very serious mistake. The alien laughed, a sound that came through the translation system as a harsh clicking noise. Mistake? I have one advanced warship against your single primitive vessel. The outcome of this encounter is not in question. You are right about one thing, Commander, Morrison replied. The outcome is not in question, but you have made a critical error in your calculations. Vexhai frowned with confusion. What error? My sensors show only your ship in this area of space. Morrison smiled grimly. That is exactly the error you made. Rodriguez, activate beacon protocol 77 Alpha. Lieutenant Rodriguez pressed a series of buttons on her panel. Suddenly, the space around the Whisper of Stars began to shimmer and distort. Commander Vexhai stared in shock as ships began appearing out of nowhere. First 1, then 5, then 10, then 20 vessels materialized from what had seemed like empty space. Within 60 seconds, 37 human warships surrounded the single Zephyrian scout ship. The vessels were of different sizes and classes, from sleek destroyers to massive battleships. Each one had weapons trained on the Whisper of Stars and shields powered to maximum strength. This is impossible, Vexhai whispered to his science officer. Where did they all come from? Commander, our sensors detected nothing. These ships were completely invisible until they revealed themselves. Their cloaking technology is somehow superior to our own. The largest of the human ships, a massive battleship with enough firepower to level a small city, opened a communication channel. On the screen appeared Admiral Paul Davis, a gray-haired man with hard eyes and a voice that carried absolute authority. Commander Vexhai, I am Admiral Davis of the United Earth Fleet. You are now surrounded by Task Force 7 of the 3rd Deep Space Patrol Group. We were conducting training exercises in this system when we detected your vessel threatening one of our ships. Vexhai felt his world collapsing around him. The intelligence reports about humanity had been completely wrong. These were not primitive creatures with basic technology. They had cloaking systems that surpassed Zephyrian capabilities. They had coordination and tactics that spoke of a military organization far more advanced than anything in the Empire's database. Admiral Davis, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. There has been a misunderstanding. I was simply conducting a routine first contact protocol with your Captain Morrison. Commander, Davis replied coldly. Threatening to fire on a diplomatic vessel is not what we consider routine first contact. You powered weapons and demanded surrender of classified military information. In human space, those are acts of aggression. Around the Whisper of Stars, the human fleet maintained perfect formation. Each ship held position exactly where it needed, to provide maximum firepower coverage while avoiding friendly fire incidents. The coordination was flawless, suggesting years of training and experience in fleet operations. Captain Morrison's voice came through the communication system. Admiral, Commander Vexhai claimed that resistance to his demands was futile. He stated that the Zephyrian Empire has conquered hundreds of worlds and that his technology is thousands of years more advanced than ours. Admiral Davis looked directly at the alien commander. Commander Vexhai, let me explain something about human military doctrine. We believe that peace is achieved through strength, and strength comes from being prepared for any situation. What you see around you is not our entire fleet. This is a single patrol group conducting routine exercises. The implications of the Admiral's words hit Vexhai like a physical blow. If this was just a routine patrol group, how many ships did humanity have in total? His sensors were detecting weapon signatures more powerful than anything in the Zephyrian arsenal. The human fleet showed signs of advanced metallurgy, energy weapons, and defensive systems that matched or exceeded Empire technology. Furthermore, Admiral Davis continued, we detected your vessel the moment it entered this system. Our long-range sensors have been tracking you for over 6 hours. We allowed you to approach because Captain Morrison requested permission to attempt diplomatic first contact. Commander Kralvin, the Zephyrian science officer, was frantically analyzing the sensor data from the human ships. What he found terrified him more than anything he had ever encountered in space. Commander, he whispered to Vexhai, their ships are not just advanced. They are designed by warriors. Every vessel shows signs of battle damage that has been repaired. These humans have been fighting wars in space. They have experience that we lack. Vex-High studied the human fleet surrounding his ship. Each vessel was positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire. If he tried to run, they would destroy him before he could engage his faster-than-light drive. If he tried to fight, 37 ships would reduce the Whisper of Stars to atoms in seconds. Captain Rick Turner of the destroyer UES Thunderbolt opened his own communication channel. Commander Vex-High, I want you to understand that we mean you no harm. Admiral Davis has authorized safe passage for your vessel if you wish to leave immediately. Captain Susan Wright from the heavy cruiser UES Defiance added her voice to the conversation. However, any attempt to use weapons or scan our ships for intelligence data will be considered a hostile act. We will respond with appropriate force. The alien commander looked around at his bridge crew. Every one of them was staring at the tactical displays with expressions of pure fear. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and completely outmaneuvered by a species they had assumed was primitive. Admiral Davis, Vex-High said carefully, I request permission to withdraw from this system. The Zephyrian Empire had no intention of causing conflict with humanity. Admiral Davis nodded. Permission granted, Commander. Captain Morrison will provide you with safe passage coordinates to the edge of our territory. I suggest you inform your superiors that humanity is willing to discuss peaceful relations through proper diplomatic channels. As the human fleet began to move into escort formation around his ship, Vex-High realized that everything the Zephyrian Empire believed about their place in the galaxy had just changed forever. They were no longer the only advanced species in the universe. Humanity had achieved technological and military capabilities that rivaled their own, and they had done it while remaining completely unknown to Empire intelligence. The most frightening part was not that humans could match Zephyrian technology, but that they had chosen to use their power defensively rather than aggressively. A species with this much military strength could have launched conquest campaigns across the galaxy. Instead, they seemed content to protect their own territory and offer peaceful cooperation to others. Commander Vex-High began composing his report to the High Command as his ship moved slowly toward the edge of human space, escorted by vessels that represented a new balance of power in the galaxy. The journey to the edge of human space felt like the longest trip Commander Vex-High had ever taken. His ship, the Whisper of Stars, moved slowly through space accompanied by 2 human escort vessels that maintained perfect formation on either side of him. The UES Swift Arrow, commanded by Captain Pete Johnson, flew off his port side while the UES Guardian with Captain Maria Santos held position to starboard. Both human ships were destroyers, smaller than his scout vessel but clearly designed for combat. Their hulls showed the distinctive markings of ships that had seen actual warfare. Armor plating had been replaced in several sections and weapon mounts showed signs of frequent use. These were not ceremonial vessels or parade ships. They were working warships operated by experienced combat crews. Commander, his science officer Kralvin reported quietly, I am detecting massive industrial facilities throughout this region of space. There are orbital shipyards, mining operations, and defense platforms scattered across multiple star systems. Vex-High felt his stomach clench with dread. How many facilities? At least 40 major installations within sensor range. The humans have militarized this entire sector of space. This is not the territory of a young species learning to explore the galaxy. This is the infrastructure of a major spacefaring civilization. The scout commander stared at the tactical display showing the human industrial network. Each facility was protected by orbital defense stations armed with weapons that could destroy attacking fleets. Supply lines connected different systems in a web of trade and communication routes. Most disturbing of all, his sensors detected at least 6 other patrol groups moving through the area on regular security sweeps. Captain Johnson's voice came through the communication system. Commander Vex-High, we will reach the boundary of human space in approximately 2 hours. Do you have any questions about our territory or our people that I can answer without compromising security? Vex-High considered the offer carefully. The human captain seemed willing to share basic information, which might help him understand how the Empire's intelligence services had made such terrible mistakes about this species. Captain Johnson, your people seem to have achieved spaceflight relatively recently according to our records. How did you develop such advanced military capabilities so quickly? Johnson was quiet for a moment before responding. Commander, humanity learned early in our history that the universe can be a dangerous place. We explored space knowing that we might not be alone out here. We prepared for the possibility that other species might not share our peaceful intentions. Captain Santos from The Guardian added her voice to the conversation. We have a saying, in our fleet, hope for peace but prepare for war. Every human ship is designed to protect our people and our worlds. We never want to be victims again. Vexai caught the implication in her words. Again? Has your species been attacked before? Not by aliens, Santos replied. But humans have fought many wars among ourselves throughout our history. We learned that freedom and peace must be defended by those willing to fight for them. When we reached the stars, we brought that knowledge with us. The alien commander felt a chill run through his body. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered so many worlds because most species they encountered were peaceful by nature. They had evolved on comfortable planets with abundant resources and no major predators. War was something they had never experienced, until Zephyrian ships appeared in their skies. Humans were different. They had evolved as hunters and warriors on a dangerous planet. They understood conflict at a fundamental level that most species never developed. When they built spaceships, they built them as weapons. When they explored the galaxy, they did so as soldiers ready for battle. Commander, Johnson continued, may I ask about your empire? How many species have joined you voluntarily versus those who were conquered? Vexai hesitated before answering. The question touched on sensitive issues about empire policy that he was not supposed to discuss with outsiders. However, these humans had demonstrated their military superiority clearly, enough that normal security protocols seemed pointless. Most species recognize the benefits of joining the empire after seeing our technological advantages, he said carefully. Some require more persuasion than others. Captain Santos laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Commander, we have studied your ship's database during the time you have been in our custody. Your empire's definition of joining voluntarily is quite different from ours. Vexai felt shocked. You accessed our computer systems? Commander, Johnson explained, your ship has been broadcasting standard identification codes and historical data since you entered our space. Our computers automatically catalog all information from unknown vessels for security analysis. We learned quite a lot about Zephyrian expansion methods. The alien realized with growing horror that human technology was even more advanced than he had thought. Their computers had been passively scanning his ship's systems without triggering any of the Whisper of Stars security protocols. If they could do that, what other capabilities were they hiding? We find it interesting, Santos continued, that your empire has conquered over 200 star systems but has never encountered serious military resistance. Most of the species in your database surrendered after minimal shows of force. The Empire's technology is far superior to most primitive civilizations, Vexai replied defensively. Perhaps, Johnson said, but technology alone does not win wars, Commander. Military success requires strategy, logistics, training, and most importantly, the will to fight regardless of the odds. How many of your conquered species actually possess those qualities? Vexai thought about the question seriously. In truth, most species the Empire had absorbed were peaceful traders or explorers who had never experienced major conflicts. They surrendered quickly because they had no military traditions and no experience with organized warfare. The few that had tried to resist were overwhelmed by superior Zephyrian technology before they could adapt their tactics. Your species is different, he admitted. You have capabilities that our intelligence services did not predict. Captain Santos nodded. Commander, let me share something with you that might help your people understand humanity. We are not conquerors. We do not want to build an empire or rule over other species, but we will never allow ourselves to be conquered either. Any species that threatens human worlds will face the full military power of our fleet. How large is your fleet? Vexai asked. Johnson smiled. Large enough, Commander. Large enough. The alien sensors detected another group of human ships passing through a nearby system. This patrol consisted of 12 vessels, including 2 battleships that were even larger than Admiral Davis's flagship. Their weapons signatures suggested firepower capable of destroying entire cities from orbit. Commander, his science officer whispered, I am detecting fleet movements throughout this region. There are at least 60 human warships within long-range sensor range. They are conducting coordinated patrols across multiple star systems. HFY felt overwhelmed by the scope of human military organization. The Empire's scouts had reported finding a small number of primitive ships exploring nearby systems. Instead, they had discovered a major military power with industrial capacity and fleet strength that rivaled their own civilization. Captain Johnson, he said, I think there has been a serious misunderstanding between our peoples. The Empire's initial contact protocols are based on encounters with much less advanced species. We understand that, Commander, Johnson replied. That is why Admiral Davis is allowing you to return safely to your territory. We hope your leaders will choose to establish proper diplomatic relations rather than attempting conquest. What if the Empire decides that humanity represents a threat to our expansion plans? Captain Santos answered with cold certainty. Then the Empire will learn that threatening humanity is the last mistake any species ever makes. As they approached, the boundary between human and neutral space, HFY composed his report to the High Command. Everything he had believed about his species' place in the galaxy had been shattered in a single day. The Zephyrian Empire was no longer the only advanced civilization in the universe. They now shared the galaxy with humans who had evolved into the most dangerous warriors he had ever encountered. The most terrifying part was that these warriors preferred peace, but were absolutely prepared for war. They had built their entire civilization around the principle that strength and diplomacy must work together to preserve freedom. Any species that threatened that freedom would face an enemy unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. As his ship crossed into neutral space, Commander HFY realized that the balance of power in the galaxy had changed forever. Commander HFY stood before the High Command of the Zephyrian Empire in the Great Council Chamber on the homeworld of Zephyria Prime. The massive room was filled with the most powerful beings in the galaxy, leaders who controlled over 200 star systems and commanded fleets that had conquered countless worlds. Supreme Commander Kethrun sat at the center of the curved table, his ancient eyes fixed on the scout who had returned with the most disturbing report in the Empire's 3,000-year history. Let me understand this correctly, Commander HFY, Supreme Commander Kethrun said in a voice that carried barely controlled anger. You encountered a single primitive human vessel, and somehow managed to be surrounded and threatened by 37 enemy ships that appeared from nowhere. Supreme Commander, I have reviewed the sensor logs dozens of times. The human cloaking technology is superior to our own. Their ships were undetectable until they chose to reveal themselves. My science officer can confirm every detail in my report. Fleet Admiral Mortak, the Empire's highest military commander, slammed his hand on the table. This is impossible. No species we have ever encountered possessed technology that could match ours, let alone exceed it. Your ship must have malfunctioned or you misinterpreted what you observed. HFY activated a holographic display that showed the tactical situation during his encounter with the human fleet. The three-dimensional image filled the center of the council chamber, displaying the positions of every ship during the confrontation. Honored commanders, this recording shows the exact moment when the human vessels decloaked. Watch their formation and coordination. Each ship moved into position with perfect timing and precision. This level of fleet coordination requires years of training and combat experience. The council members watched the recording in stunned silence. The human ships moved like a single organism, each vessel knowing exactly where it needed to be to maximize firepower while avoiding friendly fire. Incidents. The tactical formation was flawless, suggesting military doctrine far more advanced than anything in the Empire's database. Science Commander Velthura, the Empire's chief technology officer, studied the energy signatures from the human weapons. These power readings are extraordinary. Several of their ships show weapon capabilities that exceed our own battleships. How is this possible for such a young species? According to their captain, humans have been preparing for interstellar warfare since they first left their homeworld, HFY explained. They assumed they would encounter hostile species and built their entire space program around military preparedness. Supreme Commander Kethrun felt a cold fear growing in his chest. For 3 millennia, the Zephyrian Empire had expanded across the galaxy without serious opposition. They had grown accustomed to being the most advanced civilization in their region of space. The idea that another species had achieved similar or superior capabilities was almost incomprehensible. What about their industrial capacity? Asked Economic Minister Havrin. Could they sustain a long military campaign against the Empire? HFY's science officer, Kralvin, stood up to address the council. Honored ministers, our passive scans detected massive military-industrial facilities throughout human space. They have orbital shipyards, mining operations, and weapons manufacturing. Plants distributed across dozens of star systems. Their production capacity appears to rival our own. The council chamber erupted in worried conversations as the implications became clear. If the humans could match Zephyrian production capabilities and had superior military technology, any war between the species would be devastating for both sides. Fleet Admiral Mortak tried to maintain his aggressive stance. Perhaps we should launch a preemptive strike before they become even stronger. If we concentrate our entire fleet and attack quickly, we might be able to overwhelm them before they can fully mobilize. Admiral, HFY interrupted, I must strongly advise against any military action. The humans demonstrated restraint when they could have easily destroyed my ship. However, their captains made it very clear that any attack on their territory would result in total warfare. They are prepared for such a conflict in ways that we are not. Supreme Commander Kethrun leaned forward in his chair. Explain what you mean by that statement, Commander. The humans have been fighting wars among themselves for thousands of years before they reached space. Every ship I encountered showed battle damage from previous conflicts. Their crews have actual combat experience while our forces have only fought primitive species that surrendered quickly. In a real war between equals, experience matters more than technology. Intelligence Director Zorval had been quietly reviewing data throughout the meeting. Now he stood to address the council with information that made the situation even more alarming. Honored commanders, I have been analyzing our long-range reconnaissance data from the past 50 years. We have detected signs of advanced spacefaring activity in that region for decades, but we assumed it was natural phenomena or equipment malfunctions. Now I believe we were observing human military exercises and fleet movements. What does that mean for our expansion plans? Asked Territorial Governor Quindar. It means the humans have been aware of our presence for much longer than we realized. They have been watching us and preparing for eventual contact. Meanwhile, we knew almost nothing about them until Commander HFY's mission. The Supreme Commander felt the weight of command pressing down on him like a physical force. Every decision the Empire made for the next few years could determine whether Zephyrian civilization continued to prosper or face destruction at the hands of this new human military machine. What are our options? He asked the council. Fleet Admiral Mortak still favored an aggressive approach. We could attempt to form alliances with other species against the human threat. Perhaps if we combined our forces with others, we would have enough strength to defeat them. Who would ally with us? Asked Diplomatic Minister Felnara. Most species in this region either serve us as conquered subjects or avoid us out of fear. None of them have military forces worth mentioning. Intelligence. Director Zorval had more disturbing news. I have been reviewing our other scout reports from the past year. 3 reconnaissance missions to different sectors have encountered similar situations. Each time our scouts detected what appeared to be single primitive vessels, only to discover they were part of much larger and more advanced fleets. Are you saying there are other species like the humans? Supreme Commander Kethrun asked with growing dread. I am saying that our assumptions about being the only advanced civilization may have been completely wrong. The galaxy might be full of species that are as capable as we are, but they have been hiding their true strength just as the humans did. The council sat in shocked silence as they considered the implications. If multiple species had achieved technology and military capabilities similar to the Zephyrian Empire, Then the balance of power in the galaxy was nothing like what they had believed. Commander Vexhai cleared his throat to get the Council's attention. Supreme Commander, I have one final recommendation. During my encounter with the humans, they repeatedly offered to establish peaceful diplomatic relations. Captain Morrison and Admiral Davis both emphasized that they preferred cooperation over conflict. You think we should negotiate with them as equals? Fleet Admiral Mortok asked with disgust. I think we should acknowledge that they are equals whether we like it or not. The humans have the military strength to defend themselves and the industrial capacity to sustain a long war. More importantly, they have shown restraint when they could have been aggressive. That suggests wisdom that we should respect. Supreme Commander Kethron looked around the council chamber at the faces of the Empire's leadership. Every one of them understood that they were facing the most important decision in Zephyrian history. They could choose to accept that their era of unopposed expansion was over, or they could risk everything in a war they might not win. After hours of debate, the council reached a unanimous decision. All Zephyrian vessels would maintain a minimum distance of 5 light-years from human territory. The Empire would classify humanity as a Level 9 threat, requiring complete territorial avoidance. Any future contact would be handled through official, diplomatic channels with proper protocols. Commander Vexhai received assignment to the opposite edge of Zephyrian space, as far from human territory as possible. As his ship departed for the new posting, he reflected on the encounter that had changed everything. The humans had taught the Empire that true strength came not from the ability to conquer others, but from the wisdom to choose peace when possible, while maintaining the absolute certainty of victory in war. The galaxy would never be the same.